Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar on elevating the voices of children and youth who are in displacement. My name is Rebecca Vanderschaff. I'm the Director of Admissions here at the George Washington University's Graduate School of Education and Human Development. And we are lucky to have faculty on staff who study the many complexities within education and leadership from all sorts of different angles. Today, we have Dr. Jihae Cha joining us to speak about how youth navigate their identity and sense of belonging amidst displacement and resettlement. Dr. Cha is an assistant professor of international education. And after her talk, we're going to invite you to stay for a short Q&A. As she presents, please feel free to go ahead and put questions in the chat box here in Zoom. And we'll make sure to take a look at those during our Q&A session. Dr. Cha, thanks so much for being here with us today. I'll let you take it away.
Great. Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Jihae Cha, and I'm an assistant professor of international education at the George Washington University's Graduate School of Education and Human Development. Today, I'm going to share a little bit about some glimpses of my classes from Education in Emergencies, Protracted Crisis, and Resettlement, which is my expertise. And you will get to hear from me a brief overview of global displacement and what it means to be a refugee. And I'm going to share a little bit about, hopefully a little bit, about my ongoing research study on navigating sense of belonging and identity through storytelling for resettled refugees here in the United States. I'll share some of my insights as well as preliminary findings and end with some of the conclusions and implications. Hopefully you'll join us through the end so that we can have some room for a question and answer. As you notice that the world is witnessing record levels of displacement since the Second World War. In 2021, we have witnessed that there were 89.3 million forcibly displaced population who are forced to leave their homes due to crisis and conflicts. When you check the most recent up-to-date data, according to UNHCR, in October 2022, there are over 103 million people who are forcibly displaced globally. Unfortunately, as a result of the crisis in Ukraine, in Turkey, Syria, and the rest of the world. So if you look at some of the key statistics, you will see that there are 32.5 million refugees among those forcibly displaced populations, and over 30% of children and youth are refugees. In some contexts, majority are children and youth, and they're displaced. Although media is teeming with stories of refugees fleeing to Europe, Canada, Australia, and the quote-unquote global north, in reality, majority of them end up seeking refuge in neighboring countries in the global south. There, they spend 20 to 25 years in protracted displacement. And that means that some of them end up going through the entire education cycle from pre-primary to tertiary in exile, whether that's in refugee camps, informal tented settlements, or in resettlement. So I just want to stop here and let you reflect on what does a refugee mean. What is a refugee? According to the official definition shared by UNHCR, refugees are people who have fled war, violence, conflict, and persecution, and have crossed an international border to find safety in another country. They're defined and protected in international law. And according to 1951 Refugee Convention, refugee is someone who is unable or unwilling to return to their country of origin owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion. So which countries do you think produce the highest number of refugees? Obviously, you can see from the media that the most recent conflict in Ukraine has led more than 7 million. Now, I think the number has skyrocketed, but 8 million and over populations who are displaced, and most of them are fleeing to Europe. But before the Ukraine crisis up to 2022, you will see that Syria, Venezuela, Afghanistan, South Sudan, and Myanmar are the most refugee-producing countries, and which countries host the highest number of refugees. You will see that they seek refuge in countries like Turkey, Colombia, Uganda, Pakistan, Germany, and so on. If you want to find out more about these statistics, please refer to UNHCR's global trends in forced displacement. But you will see on the left that, as I mentioned previously, that children account for 30 or over % of all forcibly displaced populations. So what comes into mind when you hear the word refugees? You will see that because of these media pictures and depictions of refugees, you will see that oftentimes they're portrayed as having lost all hope. Displaced, devastated, traumatized, voiceless, vulnerable, passive, poor, hopeless, helpless, and powerless. So these are usually the terminologies that we see in media as well as the literature. However, when you visit refugee camps and informal tented settlements across the globe, you will see that refugee children have lost everything but hope. Look at these beautiful faces with their smiles. So what we are being taught of in existing literature and media is that they are unaccompanied, they're females, they're overage, and they're suffering from myriad challenges that are not limited to sexual and gender-based violence, disability, child protection issues, linguistic barriers, and many, many more. What I found from my study, however, is that there's lack of emphasis on the hopes, aspirations, joy, strength, support, and capabilities that the refugees possess. This is because we are often experiencing and hearing dominant narratives as portrayed through media and academic and gray literature, which are generally told of the youth who are refugees instead of stories told by them. And in reality, when children and youth from refugee backgrounds are not given the space to narrate their own stories, dominant narratives shape the ways they're viewed by others. And what happens is that if they're viewed through the dominant narratives, you will see that they're lacking in individuality, be perceived as being incapable of possessing individual stories, and overemphasis of traumatic experience can lead to disempowering them, often limiting their agency. So the issue is there's lack of space. When I met Mesud, I'll share a little bit of story of how I got into this narrative and storytelling. When I met a Mesud who was a refugee born and raised in Thailand, and came to the United States at the age of 12, I heard some stories that's similar, that the issue of lack of space and how that influenced her sense of belonging and community in resettlement. This is what Mesud told me. I remember the first day of school. Along the walls were banners with the word welcome in different languages. I was fascinated by the diversity of languages, but more importantly, I was excited by the idea that classroom would be a space where I could finally process some of my experiences and thoughts that had been bottled up inside me for many years. So this was what she's seen in a Clarkston school, junior high school that she went to. However, this is what she learned. I quickly learned that the celebration of multiculturalism that was openly on display never left the walls. The different languages were never practiced in classroom discussions, and there were no opportunities to share our stories. If you want to hear more about Mesud's story, it's published on Forced Migration Review, where she was the first author. Really, the issue of voice, identity, and the need for listening to refugee voices. So when I heard Mesud's story, I came to realize that if there's lack of space, what if we create space for them? What stories might they want to share? So I conducted a story telling workshop, and the context was in a DeKalb County in Georgia, in a very small town called Clarkston. And Clarkston is often referred to as the most diverse square mile in America, or the Ellis Island of the South. Clarkston is home to different populations, but over half of them is estimated by some to be foreign-born. And students attending a high school, the only high school in Clarkston, comes from over 50 countries and speaking more than 60 languages. These are some of the pictures from Clarkston, and many of them are from Southeast Asia and South Asia. So the conceptual framework that I'm bringing here is the concept of belonging. So belonging, according to Untitled, refers to a personal, intimate feeling of being at home in a place. And here, home could mean a symbolic space of familiarity, comfort, security, and emotional attachment. Belonging is also highly intertwined with identity, which has been perceived as fluid and shaped through interaction with others. So belonging carries over with them, whether they're in refugee camps, they're in exile, or here in the United States. So the methodological approaches that I brought was first narrative inquiry. So basically storytelling, because I believe and we believe that stories through which individuals interpret and make meanings of the past events lie at the heart of narrative research. And we wanted to recognize that stories shape our lives as well as our understanding of past experiences. And in essence, we wanted to examine the people's storied lives. On top of storytelling, we wanted to conduct a participatory action research. And I keep mentioning we because this is a collaborative work between myself, my collaborator, as well as the refugee youth themselves. So participatory action research is a collective investigation of a problem, the reliance on indigenous knowledge that refugees possess to better understand that problem, which is the lack of space, and the desire to take individual or collective action to deal with stated problem. So children and youth with refugee experience here in this particular study are best positioned to identify issues in their community. So this is pretty much work in progress that I'm sharing with you. And for the purpose of this webinar, I'm going to share the first part of our project. So when we met, it was in August of 2022, and we conducted an in-person workshop with about 9 participants from ages 18 to 25, those with refugee or immigrant experiences. I keep using the word youth with refugee and immigrant experience because I wanted to delabel their identity from being a refugee to being a youth or young adult with particular ethnic identities. So my collaborator and I, with Mesa, the one that I shared earlier, led workshops on storytelling, the importance of sharing out the meaning behind their names, the meaning behind their sense of belonging, and their experiences here in the United States. So after a 2-day intensive workshop, it was followed by online Zoom sessions through 6 months where they were able to lead their own workshops. So each youth took the turns and created a space where they came up with their own topics of interest and wanted to share with their colleagues. This, of course, was done thanks to a partnership that we have with a local NGO in Clarkston, as well as the support from on-site coordinator and facilitator. So I wanted to share with you some of the preliminary findings. What if we provided this space to the refugee youth? What was the major findings? So we realized that when we created that space, it was the community building through storytelling was possible. And they really felt that there was a safe space to foster a sense of community or connectedness among these populations with similar experience. Most of the participants said that they had both never participated in a storytelling workshop or shared a story about their identities and experiences in the past. For them, listening seemed to be a validating experience. Hearing stories that shared common strands developed a sense of community among the young people. The use of words such as community, similar, gathering reinforced the collective power of storytelling and highlighted that stories can not only build community, but are meant to be shared. Next, we also found that through these spaces, they were able to find voice or their individual and unique stories. Participants recognized that through storytelling, they realized that their stories are distinct and unique and not homogeneous as part of a larger refugee population. When given the safe, inclusive space to craft their stories, they were able to develop self-confidence in their own experiences and recognize the importance of sharing them with others. Let me share with you a quote from one of our participants. She said, "I had no idea of what storytelling is. I always thought that because we were so similar, maybe one story is enough to cover or represent everyone's story. And so I never thought of my story as my own story. But I'm learning that my story is uniquely my story, and that's very personal." Last but not least, we also found that after they have gained their voice and become storytellers, they're becoming more and more as agents of change. Recognizing the value of storytelling, they seek ways to educate and empower younger generation with similar experiences such as siblings, family members, and communities. They hope to create some innovative ways to help their younger generation to A, find their voices and identities, and B, preserve their stories or cultural heritage. One participant said, "Processing through storytelling allows me to connect different story pieces. It enabled me to catch that all along. Today, I can share my personal journey and go after my desire to becoming an educator, especially for students who have a similar background as me." Another participant said, "I want them," here them refers to the siblings or younger generation of refugees. "I want them to remember that their identity comes from a rich culture, family history, and heritage, and that it is something they should be proud of." So what are some of the conclusions and implications from this storytelling project that I'm currently conducting? That it's important for us to create space, and not just a space, a safe, inclusive space where stories of people from diverse backgrounds are accepted, respected, valued, and celebrated. It is when we create this space and provide it to them that they can have a sense of belonging, a community where they can also freely navigate their identity. Again, I showed you this slide that most commonly refugees are viewed as with deficit lens. However, through multiple rounds of storytelling and multiple rounds of interactions with these bright refugee students with refugee backgrounds, I've noticed that they're nothing but voiceful, knowledgeable, with agency, stories, culture, resilient, active and rich, hopeful, powerful, and resourceful. So I want to encourage all the educators, the future educators, researchers, policymakers, and practitioners to note this, to see that stories are culturally sustaining. It can offer ways in which young people can reflect and be active agents in their telling of stories. And how can we reimagine school and community as space for belonging and listening? We have to adjust school climate and cultivate a sense of belonging, which is critical to students' emotional attachment, academic commitment, and involvement. Perhaps for policy, practice, and research to be truly significant and meaningful, we just have to listen. This may entail some time-consuming processes that are not immediately fruitful, but such approaches may provide the holistic, long-term support that is truly in the interest of these youth or storytellers. So what are some of our next steps? I'm not sure if some of you may have seen, but these youth came and participated in the Diversity Summit that was hosted by George Washington University in early March. And after that, we have conducted a reflection and planning session because in July, we're going to ensure that these participants are becoming and planning to be change makers. So we are currently in the process of planning to conduct 1 week-long summer camp with children and youth aged 13 and above in Clarkson in Georgia. We're hoping to share some more findings in the next coming months. So on behalf of the storytellers, thank you so much for listening, and I hope to interact with you more in Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cha, for your very informative presentation. It was so interesting. We will start a short Q&A now. So for those of you listening live, please go ahead and type questions that you have into the chat box, and then I'll read those off on your behalf. I know we have a couple already, so I'll just start there, and then as they come in, we can add more. So the first question we have is, what does education typically look like in a refugee camp? And is there any measurement of success?
That is a very good question. Well, I can spend hours talking about the myriad challenges that students are facing in the refugee camp, but I think typically you will know that, lack of space, lack of teacher professional development, lack of school supplies, school uniforms, or these are some of the factors that are influencing the academic performance, persistence, and transition of refugee students in the camp. And when I say refugee camps, I'm referring mainly to what I have, witnessed in a Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya. In terms of success, however, you will see that when we expand the notion of success, looking at the persistence, the fact that they're in school is, despite their traumatic experiences, there's the lack of parental and guardian figure in the camp, being unaccompanied, lacking these resources. The fact that they're in school is already, I believe, is a measurement that they're showing agency and motivation. So if you can see, I don't have it off the top of my head, but we have witnessed that, an increasing number of girls and boys are graduating from primary school, which was not the case decades ago. So they're not only graduating, they're performing even better than some of their Kenyan colleagues. A lot of them are seeking scholarships to be educated outside of the camp. And some of the students that I personally are in touch with have already secured scholarships to study in Nairobi or different parts of the world like Canada. So there are movements towards supporting more refugees through globally and locally situated resources. However, we also have to acknowledge that there's still myriad challenges. The successful stories are only speaking to a very small number of students.
Makes sense. So our second question is similar. How has online education impacted the options for children and youth in refugee communities?
Great. So the distance education is new in the field of education and emergencies. If you look at the current circumstances in the camp with lack of electricity, lack of space, lack of devices, it's really hard to imagine that primary schoolers and secondary schoolers are having access to these laptops and gaining, listening, learning virtually. However, there is increasing programs that are offered to those who have graduated from secondary school. I'm speaking about Kakuma refugee camp, where there's certificate programs or something called diploma programs that were provided to those teachers or those who are graduates of secondary schools, where they can listen into different university professors giving lectures on specific field of study. However, these are not necessarily accredited as formal degree. So even if they finish that, they are not able to get a bachelor's degree or master's degree. So there's limitations to it, but there are different organizations like Jesuit World Learning and others that are coming into the camp and providing different devices as well as opportunities for these populations to be educated.
Makes sense. The next question is, what are some of the topics that your students here at GW are studying in relation to this topic, so to refugee education?
Good question. And I'm happy to share more about this class that I'm teaching, Education in Emergencies. But oftentimes, students are interested in different topics, as some of them are practitioners already working for organizations. Some of them are educators of refugee and immigrant populations. So from a topic on psychosocial well-being for children and youth, or even teachers, teacher professional development, child protection issues, gender. And so students are doing myriad studies on in relation to forcibly displaced population. And given the time constraint, I only explained a little bit about refugees, but we have to also consider there are, beyond refugees, we have internally displaced persons, IDPs, asylum seekers who are not yet granted the refugee or resettlement status. We have immigrant population, we have undocumented immigrants. So there are different populations involved across the globe. So people have different interests, from peace education, gender, child protection. So you can name diverse topics.
So it looks like we have one more question, and then okay, there's two more questions, I think.
Sure.
So the first one is more related to actually K through 12 teaching. So do you have advice for teachers who have children who are refugees in their classrooms? And how can those students feel like they belong?
So we're currently conducting, thank you for that question, because that's very important and a lot of my students are grappling with that. So in reality, when we have conducted a quick analysis of the curriculum, there's only so much space in the curriculum or standards that offer teachers, that space to discuss about refugees. However, there are always ways where you can take an asset-based approaches. What I meant by asset-based approach is that you have to really acknowledge the culture and language that these children and youth are bringing from their past experiences. So in classrooms, in school-wide support, I think there's always ways where you can create spaces through advisory boards or homeroom sessions. So these are some examples of it. There are multiple resources available online where you can see at the classroom level or the school, or how to engage communities and families and alumni, how to take advantage of the community-based organizations. But really, I wanted to emphasize that some of you raised really great questions. How do we measure success? What are the different dimensions of success? How can we ensure that we're taking, really acknowledging the wealth of experience and cultural backgrounds that these kids are bringing? So really acknowledging that and listening to children. Just like Mess said, if she was given the space to talk about her experience in social studies curriculum, English curriculum, or elsewhere, I think she would have flourished more and felt that sense of belonging. One resource that I can share with you, which was recently published, is Humanizing Education for Refugees and Immigrants, published by Dr. Manisha Bajaj and others. So you can refer to different 20 strategies that you can learn, whether that's classroom or school-wide, as educators, leaders, and practitioners in the field. Sorry if I wasn't able to answer, but I'm referring to you to another resource that you can learn from.
That's really helpful. Okay, final question. How can educators support sense making given how many of them navigate traumatic experiences?
As educators hold space, how do they support sense making? Yeah, I think it's really important to also acknowledge the traumatic experiences. And I don't want you to be really just coming in as educator and feeling that you have the burden to to host all of these refugees with issues. I think seeking support from those who have undergone similar experiences would be the most beneficial, because I'm not a refugee myself. I come from a completely different background, even if I'm an immigrant. So it really taking advantage of the community wealth, so to speak. So bringing in alumni, bringing in counselors to really create that space for them to uh, share about their past experiences, whether that's positive and negative, I think is the key to really creating that sense of belonging, for creating that safe space and inclusive space where the kids can feel the sense of belonging.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Cha, and also to our audience for your attention on this critical topic. If you are interested in learning more about the training that our school offers in this area, please reach out to our admission office and we'd be happy to connect you with faculty, staff, students, whoever can shed light on these issues, and how you can get involved as well. We do hope to see you join us at our next webinars, which you can find in the admission events section of our website. And I think I'll leave it there. So thanks again for joining, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you all join us here at GW. Thanks so much.
Thank you.